me just... Cool. Awesome. Yeah. It works? Yes, perfect. Woo, so many people. Hello, everyone. Thanks for staying so far. It's the afternoon, second talk after the lunch break. I think we are all a bit dozing off and feeling sleepy. I cannot see you, but I guess you are because I feel like that a bit. So maybe I'll just shout in my microphone a bit every now and then to just keep myself a bit awake, and maybe you also as well. But I'm very excited to be here. Before I start with anything, I have a little something close to my heart I want to share, and that's community. That's us, that's everyone who's here the past these 2 or 3 days to listen, to learn, and to grow together. That's the community. I think that's very valuable. I think that's very impressive, and it deserves its recognition. So this one is for you, and this one's for us. Thanks for coming. Yes, but today I want to talk about microfrontends, obviously. What they are and their benefits, their usefulness. I know Mark had a very interesting opening to, hey, who uses microfrontends? Who's happy with them? Well, maybe I can change some minds. We'll see how that goes. I won't ask you to raise your hands afterwards, but if you have any questions or any feedback about it, I'm happy to talk about it afterwards. So I'll talk about them and the benefits. Maybe I'll give some hints about module federation and what it is, and what it means in the context of microfrontends. I'll talk about how Vue, Nuxt, and TypeScript help with microfrontends, and they have come a long way. And I'll share some real-life examples and code snippets from a project that is very well known here in the Netherlands. But first, let's talk about me. My name is Reza. Of course, I'm a 20-something-year-old kid born in Iran, but I've been living here in the Netherlands long enough to kind of not mind the weather anymore. I was going to say enjoy the weather, but I don't think it happens. I'm the second Iranian person here on the stage today after Puya Parsa this morning. Yes, thank you. Also, I'm going to use my hands a lot. Don't be alarmed. It's OK. It's normal. I always do that. I use my hands a lot. It's all over the place. I'm a software engineer, mostly focusing on front-end and web development these days. I use so many cool frameworks and meta frameworks that's out there. I use Vue, Nuxt, TypeScript, Tailwind CSS, Vite, a lot of cool stuff. Very excited for what Evan shared yesterday, I think, right, about Vue Native. That sounds very exciting. Looking forward to that. It's my first time speaking on this stage, by the way. It feels awesome. Maybe it's because I cannot see anyone because there is a huge, big, shining light here, but it feels very good. I work at Funda. If you live outside the Netherlands, or if you don't know about Funda, it's the biggest real estate platform in the Netherlands. Something like Zillow if you're from America, or if you're from Canada, or like Hemnet if you come from Sweden, for example. If you want to buy a house, Funda is your uncle. That's your go-to website. I'm not going to make it a very boring commercial talk and say Funda is awesome because of this, and this is what Funda does. Really like that. I'll just mention the example of Funda because I work there and I want to give some code examples. I want to share some parts of the code with you, how we are dealing with microfrontends and how we have set it up the past years. So let's get into it, but I don't have anything like a very philosophical quote like the past days that we have seen, or no, exciting news. There's going to be a Nuxt Funda module. No? No, unfortunately. But I'll share some stuff from Funda. Imagine Nuxt Funda. That would be awesome, I guess. I don't know. Microfrontends. What are they? Breaking down large monolithic applications into smaller, manageable, kind of independent parts. parts otherwise known as micro apps or verticals in this example, in this context. A lot of big words. Maybe it doesn't make sense to some people who rose their hands before with Mark. It makes sense to them maybe. Imagine you have a big project, like what you see here on your left. In modern web development, module federation, what I said I would share a hint about before, is a powerful feature that enables code sharing and dynamic loading between different applications. Let's see what it means in the context of micro frontends, right? It's an architectural approach in front-end development where a bigger application decomposes into smaller, semi-independent micro apps, like what you see, for example, on your right side. It is your right side, right? Yeah, it is. Yeah. It means teams can work autonomously on different parts of a web application with their preferred technologies and frameworks. If you think about the topic of DDD, the domain-driven development, that's a very hot topic, not only recently, but for some time already. Each micro frontend can encapsulate a specific functionality or feature of the application. And then together, all of these applications together, they make your platform. Thinking about the pros and benefits of this architecture, it promotes scalability and flexibility because it enables independent teams to work on different parts of the application individually, and that's very good. Again, a lot of big words, things that might not make any sense. So let me make it a bit more tangible. Let me tell you a story about it. So I said I work at Funda, right? Look at this example. Projects start and they grow, meaning with time they become so big and harder to maintain. On the left, you see the beginning of Funda. Unfortunately, I mean, I'm sorry for your eyes to be seeing this thing. Yeah. Now, 25 years later, 25 after, what happened there? This is how Funda looks on the right. It has grown so much in context, in content, so much in components, so much in services, in modules, in pages, in a lot of things. So somewhere around 4 or 5 years ago, we decided that it makes sense for us to kind of break down the already big and grown project into smaller verticals, smaller projects. Think of verticals or projects like a homepage, or the search page, a detail page, a favorite page, account page, many other pages that you can think about maybe in the context of your companies and your businesses. You know, you can think about articles coming from a CMS that doesn't need to necessarily be all together with the main functionality of your business. When all of these pages and routes and projects were one big monolith, it would maybe take 2 hours to deploy a fix or something to production. And these 2 hours, if everything went smoothly and if no tests failed, and I mean, that's something else, don't even get me started with that. Something fails, you have to start all over or just retry. Now, things have changed. Each of the pages that you see are independent applications. Might I add, all of these actually are using Vue and Nuxt. Most of them are using the latest version of Vue 3, Nuxt 3, TypeScript. We are so ready to go live. Well, when Nuxt 4 comes out, we are so ready to adapt to it. Woo, Team Funda. Thank you for the audience laughter. Deployment now takes minutes. If you want to ship a new feature live, if you want to roll back something that's already alive, something's broken, it just takes a few minutes. It saves us so much money and resources, which is a big win. Let's talk about the role of Vue and Nuxt in this, and of course also TypeScript. But very quickly, I mean, you know who these ladies are, right? Because I was talking with some people before I come here, and no one knew. Like, you know Golden Girls, right? Thank you. Yeah, I was talking with like 5 people beforehand, and people are like, "Who are these ladies? Your aunts, your mom?" And I'm like, "No, These are the Golden Girls, the OG comedy people in the 80s, 90s. Anyway, Vue 3 offers composition API, which I think is the best thing since sliced bread. It helps for better modularity. We also have Nuxt 3, which simplifies server-side rendering, and it also provides so many modern and cool tooling out there. As an added bonus, Vue and Nuxt also type safety comes out of the box with Nuxt, which is super cool. Remember, I mentioned module federation before, about code sharing between your applications. Interesting to mention the role of tools like Webpack and Vite in this. You know, Webpack 5 supports module federation natively, and Vite doesn't support it natively, but there are plugins with which you can just easily go for module federation and break down your applications and do code sharing and dynamic loading and everything. That's about Vue and Nuxt. TypeScript we also have. The role TypeScript plays in ensuring type safety and adding static typing for better reusability is pretty awesome, I think. I don't think I need to try to sell TypeScript to you. It's 2025. If you have not been using TypeScript, what have you been doing? It's a t-shirt idea. There you go, passionate people for next year. If you haven't been using TypeScript, what have you been doing? But let's see how it all works together and what we need to set up these so-called alleged micro-frontends I've been talking about. Remember, in micro-frontend context, you have a host application or an app shell project. And that's where you have your shared components, your services, things like the setup you have for your internationalization, for example. You have your routing logic. You have your authentication system. You have your, or maybe even like things like your header and footer, which are the same throughout your platform because they are reused, they are shared between all the pages. And then you also have your separate applications or your verticals that are based on the domains. They're isolated from each other, they are domain-based, and they use shared modules. And the way they use shared modules, I'm going to try to, maybe make some arrows. So you can just install your host application into your verticals, and they can use these shared, like for example, your routing, your internationalization, and everything without have to duplicate the logic there. You could also have Nuxt layers. You know, think about a shared component. Like a very easy example could be something like a search box that you could have on different pages of your application that do not necessarily have the same logic or domain, but they reuse something like a search box. The search box, with the use of Nuxt components, you can just install again or make use of your host or app shell project in your Nuxt layer if you want to track something in your component, if you want to use anything with authentication inside it, for example, and then reuse this layer or this component inside any page that you want. Yeah. Again, some arrows, some big words. What does it mean, really? How do you connect? How do these things connect with each other? I want to show you some code, which is, why we are here, I guess, to show how it actually works. You have your module.typescript file in which you define and initialize your, everything that you need to be available in your applications. You know, think about think about your internationalization file, the TypeScript in which you can just install your locales with Nuxt hooks. Think about routing logic. Think about your authentication logic, where you could just, for example, add your server route handlers there. You can do so much more. You can add so much more here. Like, for example, you can do your Tailwind config, VueJS config, whatever you use, your secrets that coming from maybe somewhere in Azure or somewhere else. But these are mostly build time code examples. You could also have runtime code examples. Think about components. Like I said, I had header.vue, but after Jakub's talk, I quickly changed it to the header because I want to be one of the cool kids as well. Think about the header, the footer components you want to reuse throughout your application on different pages. You could also have composables. Alex yesterday had a very interesting talk about composables. What are composables? You know, everything that, for example, has reactivity in it, everything that has maybe some hooks in it. In this example, you have a use user, the TypeScript. You can access, for example, user email address or a hashed ID or something that you want to use in your application. You could also have layouts, plugins, utils, a lot more. Think of anything that could be reusable or reused in your applications later on. So much you can add here. Static assets, layouts, that I think I already mentioned there, yeah. Your UI library, consent management, tracking setup, your logger setup. So this is how the file, the module.ts looks. You can add the functions that you declared before to install or init them for the build time. You can add your runtime code, you know, the components that I talked about, the plugins, everything else you can add here, even if you want to use any other module, like your own component library, or like if you have any specific icons library that you want to use. Things like VueJS or Nuxt image, if you want to use, you can just add everything here inside the setup function of your module.ts file. And then, so far, this is how your setup looks, right? And the amazing thing is that you can also define some default values right here. You have your authentication logic, your servers that they use a specific ID to connect to a pool of identity or something, or any other example. Values like IDs and names that you need for any tool can be added here. Think of Sentry, think of Datadog. If you need any write IDs, any keys, they can all be added here. Cherry on the top is that you can also declare your interfaces here. Now that we made our module, it's time to use it in the applications, in the verticals, in the separate projects that we talked about. Like think of the routes, the home page, the landing pages, the favorites page, the contact page. You install your module that we made as a dependency, and you extend the module in your Nuxt config file, and voila, you can use it. And if you want to overwrite any default values you added before, the example of the authentication I gave you, that you had an ID, you said, for example, this is the parts, well, this is, for example, the ID I want my authentication to go to or to use. Imagine now you want to use this module in a different project that is for maybe your internal people, for your service owners, for your stakeholders. You want to use a different kind of ID to connect to a different identity pool. An example, I'm sure you can think about different tracking IDs, write keys for your A/B testing tools because you want to have different A/B testing tools. You can overwrite everything here. In conclusion, it's the last few minutes. What did I talk about? We had a light intro into micro frontends. We talked about module federation a bit, about reusing the codes that you have. We talked about maintainability, scalability, and independent deployments of each of the micro apps and the code reusability with things like, for example, Nuxt layers. Yeah, we use about Vue and Nuxt and the role they play in easier developer experience. Well, maybe a better word than easier is a more pleasant developer experience because, well, not always it's easier. We all remembered moving from, for example, Nuxt 2 to Nuxt 3, and that was a big challenge, but it's becoming more pleasant. And the composition API, the modular framework from Nuxt 3, the awesome capabilities like SSR, they are super cool. I show you some examples from an actual module, how you define it, and how you, for your shared services and your components. and how you use it in your verticals that are domain-based, based on the routes, or the business logic, or the reusability, or the teams and everything. Nuxt layers, if you want to go to the next level, really comes in handy. But then, there's the question, micro frontends. Is it something for me? The answer is yes, or the answer is no. Well, I guess the answer is, I don't know, maybe. I think the right answer is it depends. Yes, exactly. The answer is it depends on your project, the nature of your project, the scale of it, the plans you have with your teams, where it wants to go and how it wants to grow. So yeah, the correct answer is it depends. It's not something for everyone. It's not something for every project. If you have a smaller project with a lower user traffic, you don't need it. If you have a bigger project, I know some big companies are using it and are happy with it. We use it at Funda. People from Kong, I think it's an American-based company, they had a talk about it a few years ago. In Canada, they use it. They use Vue as well. Adam de Haven had a very cool talk about it. The Dutch railway system, ProRail, uses it with Angular, actually. They have micro frontends with Module Federation. With Angular, they use it. But it doesn't happen overnight. It takes some time to break down your application, to make slices from your big project. It took us maybe many tries and errors and failures to get to what we are now, and we are happy with it, and it takes us minutes to deploy a new change with confidence. So the answer is it depends on you and the responsibilities of your teams. Having said that, I want to close it off. That's about everything I wanted to talk about. Here's where you find me if you have any questions, if I said anything you don't agree with, or if you have any comments or feedback. This is me. I'm not very active on social media. About every February and March, I just go there because of the conference to see what people are doing, and the other 11 months, I don't go there anymore. I'll try to update my slides there in the coming weeks, maybe. No promises there. But thank you for listening.